Welcome back to the Dota Radio Morning Show, presented by Dota Radio, the internet radio dedicated to Dota 2. Make sure you visit us at dotaradio.com to learn more about our audio-only style of commentary. Remember, folks, you can tweet at us live during the show at ZyoriTV, at the Dota Radio, or at HippieCasting for your tweeting pleasure. Remember to check out all live stream action here. We've got the Twitch TV stream rolling, our audio-only radio stream rolling, and then there's that podcast archive that will be up as soon as this episode is complete. Big shout out to all you podcast listeners out there. I know there's quite a few of you. Remember, guys, you can always email into the show, morningshow at dotaradio.com, and make sure you check out the portal as well, dotaradio.com/morningshow. Again, back with almost the usual suspects. Myself, Zayori, going to be your host today. Monolith still in transit for his Korea trip following Dignitas into the Nexon Supermatch Invitational. But alas, Chris is back with us. Mr. Hippie on the analysis desk. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great, man. I'm really looking forward to today's episode. I think we have some great topics, and I'm just so excited after yesterday's matches and looking at today's matches. It's such a wonderful week of Dota. I can't not be happy.
That is exactly right. It has been just an amazing array of matches yesterday. Another one of those days just on the edge of my seat, like, oh my god, what's going to happen? We got a lot to talk about, indeed. So, alas, Monolith not with us again. I don't think he's going to be back Friday. He's been sort of incommunicado as he's been traveling about. So, yeah, I see Liquid Mike in chat. Every time I come here, Monolith is gone. Sorry, man. It's bad dice roll. He should be back for Monday at the very least, if not today. So let's go ahead and jump straight into it, Hippie. We're going to talk MLG first, and this is special for me because I was a guest caster on the MLG stream Monday night looking at the qualifiers leading up to MLG Columbus. Now, we know there's going to be 9 teams at the MLG Columbus tournament. We've talked about the insanity of how cool that roster is. This 9th slot is via an invitation-only qualifier that MLG has been hosting, and it's getting very close to the end. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at our screen cap over here. We can see the brackets. On Monday night, we saw this tournament almost complete. We saw both the semifinal rounds, even though the second one isn't updated. It has been completed. Pretty Boy Swag took out Stay Free 2-1. Stay Free is that, quote, Han trash team. Trouf, Enzo, Zai, some of the other reasonably known Han players, and then PSST4, Vex Gaming, 2 teams that I was not very familiar with. PSST4 did win over Vex 2-0 in a very fast series. It was rather one-sided, but most of this discussion here I want to talk about is, A, the finals of this tournament are tonight, if I'm not mistaken, on the MLG stream, so we will know tonight who will be the 9th team going in to MLG Columbus, and that's pretty exciting. It's probably going to be Pretty Boy Swag, and they are a team to watch out for. I don't know, I know you caught some of that series, Chris, but the Pretty Boy Swag Stay Free series was insane. A best of 3 that went to the 3rd match. That's usually the recipe for a good series, but that game 3, man, it was Stay Free's game. They had a 25,000 golden experience lead. They were so far ahead. They had this stacked Fury on. Their team was out of control, and they lost. They threw it all away, and Pretty Boy Swag were able to make it happen. It was just a ridiculous series to cast. What was your take on Game 3, Chris?
I caught the second half of it. I was actually working during Game 2 and part of Game 3. It was really unfortunate because I was seeing all of Mott's posts on Twitter about how crazy everything was going. I was just like, I'm so mad I can't be watching this right now. But what I was really seeing and what struck me about that game is you had the problem on Stay Free's team of the fact that your lineup didn't use gold particularly effectively. You could have a huge gold lead, but the heroes that you had didn't take advantage of that as thoroughly as some of the heroes on Pretty Boy Swag. I mean, there was a Weaver on Pretty Boy Swag, and the Weaver alone outcarried everything that Stay Free could bring to the table. Because if I'm not correct, their farmers were a Bloodseeker, who was in their 1 position, a Queen of Pain in mid, and a Furion in the off lane. Those are 3 heroes that they can get very farmed.
I think it was Clockwork in the off lane, and he was jungle. He was a dedicated jungler from the start.
Okay. So you end up with this Bloodseeker who doesn't use gold well at all in the late game. He's not someone who transitions to a carry at all. You have Queen of Pain, who's a semi-carry at best, and you have Furion, who, I mean, he gets a whole lot of gold. He's kind of similar to Alchemist in that he gets 6 slotted faster than everyone else, but he's not anywhere near as effective as someone like Alchemist with those 6 slots. He's not as good as an anti-mage with 6 slots. He can split push just fine, but then so can Weaver. Weaver's a really good split pusher. So what I mean that was something I tweeted out and something I really wanted. I wished I was kind of on the air so I could just have a brief discussion about this. You have to consider when you're thinking about a game like that and you're thinking about a gold advantage, not just which team has more gold, but which team can actually use all of the gold they have most efficiently. Because,
Yeah.
a Bloodseeker with one extra item on a Weaver probably still not going to be able to kill a Weaver in most situations.
Yeah.
Weaver's just a better hero and a much better late gamer.
Yeah. There were kind
So
of
that
two big pieces to that I think were particularly prevalent in that game. That Bloodseeker got a super early butterfly, and there was like a 15, 20 minute, maybe not 20, maybe a 10 to 15 minute window where he had that 35% evasion and they had no MKB. It took forever for that Weaver to farm an MKB. And that was the time that they spent farming, and I just kept thinking to myself, oh my god, Bloodseeker's going to fall off soon. You guys have to capitalize on this 35% evasion. This is your golden ticket to getting some racks here. And they weren't able to do it. And the other thing, I don't want to pick on Shroff too much, but he was sort of slated as part of the reason that they were able to throw, because he got picked off solo, then he bought back, and then he got picked off again sort of before the next fight really started. And then it ended up being kind of an easy 5v4 throne race. Pretty Boy Swag pushed in, 5v4. Oh god, my pop filter, popping up my pop filter. Pretty straightforward. So that was sort of unfortunate. The Furion, the one good call I made that game was when we were talking about what Furion was going to transition into after his opening core, Midas. I think he went Orchid first, Phase Boots. And I was like, I'm thinking he's going to go Desolator Crit because they're going to want to do that split pushing thing. They need to win this game soon. And Mont was like, no, Sheepstick. And he went Desolator, but he never used it. He never really used that Desolator Crit to knock down any towers. And that's the power of the Furion, that global presence. And they just weren't able to pull it off. It was a crazy series, though. If you didn't see it, I would recommend checking it out, especially that game 3. Really, really intense. And I don't know. It was a fascinating series, to say the least. So with that said, Pretty Boy Swag versus PSST tonight in the finals. I already mentioned that. And we'll know which team will be making it into MLG Columbus for the final roster. And I have to say, though, Chris, casting with Mont was a pleasure. That was the first time I'd ever casted with him. He's a really, really solid caster. One of those guys that, like, just kind of popped on, and I asked him, like, all right, so are we doing like a color play-by-play, or are we just going to kind of wing it? He was like, oh, let's just go for it. You'll do some play-by-play, I'll do some play-by-play, and we'll share, and it'll be fun. And it was seamless. It was an absolute pleasure. And hat off to you, Mont. You're a badass.
he's a pretty great dude. I haven't had the opportunity to cast with him. I'm really looking forward to getting the chance sometime in the near future. Maybe I'll get to do
I hope so.
some MLG qualifiers or something. I would really enjoy that. He seems like the kind of guy I would really like casting with, quite
Yeah.
frankly.
And for me, it was nice to be able to be the co-caster and not have to do any of the production stuff. So I just get to sit there and wait for the cues. Like, all right, and now, oh, hey, everyone. So easy for me. I just have to sit here and look pretty. I don't have to do any of the buttons. I don't have 20 tabs open like I do right now. So we'll talk more about MLG on Friday once we have that final roster. Hopefully we can, we're planning on getting a guest from MLG, Adam App or someone similar, once we get closer to the event to sort of hear about their finalized plans and get their total take on the upcoming Columbus event. Now let's go ahead and talk Natalic Pro League. They're going to be back in action on November 8th. Their new schedule has been posted. Part of the issue, of course, was that Fnatic was traveling, and this here, I'll show the brackets right here. This is where we're at. It was originally scheduled for November 1st, Fnatic versus Virtus Pro. As you can see, they're holding back this entire bracket. Whoever wins that will be playing Sigma International, and then, of course, up against Mouse Sports for the finals. So that's going to be completed very, very quickly here. But there are other cups coming up now, and they have scheduled all of it. And their website's a little bit funky, but if you click on the actual little icons here, it'll bring you to the schedule as such. And there will be matches coming up. I have it in my notes here. The 8th, as we already mentioned, and then there will be another tournament starting the 11th and 12th, and then November 15th and 16th, and then the 18th and 19th. So there should be pretty much non-stop Natalic Pro League matches starting on the 8th, 2 days from now. And Hippie and I are excited to announce we're going to be casting it. Yes, we're finally working with tournament organizers. We got the go-ahead to do Dota radio coverage, so I actually got an email this morning asking about what happened. Were we scared away from casting because we were told to turn off our stream for D2CL and MLG? And no, we are not afraid. We will stand strong, and we're going to be casting Natalic. So, Chris, I know you're pumped up, but I'm really excited for that tournament to be back in action.
Hey, I'm not only excited to be getting back in casting action, but once again, we get to start right there with a Fnatic series, and
Yeah.
I can't be happier than when I'm watching Fnatic. I love my Han Trash. I was Han Trash, and I like where I am now, and I love where they are now.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And that's going to be a good segue here. Let's talk about Fnatic a little bit. They are back from Korea. Yesterday, they had a pretty crazy day. They are kicking ass and taking names. I don't know if that's the right adage, but it's still applicable. In D2L, they took out Virtus Pro in a one best-of-3 series. If I'm not mistaken, Fnatic did 2-0 over them. And it was a pretty convincing series. I had it on and kind of was half paying attention, but it was a pretty impressive series. Virtus Pro still struggling to hit their stride a little bit. They did have that roster change, still a very powerful roster, but you can kind of tell against a team like Fnatic that's been together for so long and this Virtus Pro roster that hasn't been together very long, there was just a difference in kind of team synergy. It felt like Fnatic was just a little bit more on the ball, a little bit more well-groomed, if you will. But yesterday's really fascinating series came when in the Dream League, where we had Alliance versus Na'Vi, and then we had Fnatic versus Na'Vi, and then Na'Vi versus Fnatic again, which was insane. And Fnatic did 2-0 Na'Vi yesterday. Blew my mind a little bit. I mean, I think Na'Vi were the favorites. It's a close matchup, but to 2-0 in back-to-back best-of-ones was pretty impressive, and they were pretty convincing. And part of what really made it stand out in my mind, Chris, as we're going to talk about later with these meta warriors, the heroes that they picked. In the first game, Fnatic won with Naga, Wisp, Shadow Fiend, Tide, and Alchemist. Some pretty old-school heroes there. Game 2, they had Enigma, Naga, Lifestealer, Timbersaw, and DK. Running those heroes that have not been nearly as popular in 6.79. I mean, we've seen matches where Naga, Wisp, Batrider get completely ignored in a draft. Not banned, not picked, completely ignored. And Fnatic says, hey, you're going to leave Wisp on the board? First pick, no problem. And they won. It blew my mind. So happy to see a team kind of breaking through all this meta bullshit here with 6.79.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they got kind of convinced as hard by a couple of the nerfs, because I mean, you know, I mentioned it a little bit before we went live, so I'll mention it again for the VOD viewers and the podcast listeners. I don't think that the nerfs to some of these heroes, yeah, they got nerfed, but there are people who are like, oh, these heroes are totally unplayable now. I'm like, no, absolutely not. They're just not. They're still really good. You can't look at a hero like Batrider and look at a guy who has, oh man, he has this like really great blink initiation that goes right through BKB and isolates a hero from the entire team. But crap, it's harder to use now. He must be terrible.
Garbage
tier. No. That rider is amazing. He's still really good. He just doesn't automatically win all his lanes anymore.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. And Wisp the same way. I mean, that nerf to Wisp, now the tether doesn't stun. It's just that 100%.
Nerf to Wisp is bigger, I thought.
Yeah, the nerf to Wisp is absolutely bigger. And Wisp, I think, is appropriately not a totally top tier hero right now in terms of first pick, first ban every game. I think that makes sense, but I think Wisp is still strong enough that he should be run more often than he is right now. As proved by No-Tail, there's still an unbelievable amount of power with that hero in terms of relocate ganks, being able to get momentum for your carry. And it was just so refreshing to see a team sticking true to their roots, saying, you know what, we were doing fine with these heroes in 6.78. We're not going to overreact to the patch, and we're still going to run the heroes that we're comfortable with. And that's just part of the reason why I love Fnatic. One of my absolute favorite teams. And plus, I like seeing Tidehunter, man. That's always exciting. At DK mid, I haven't seen a Dragon Knight mid in a little while. In Game 2, we saw a jungling Doom versus the jungling Enigma. And Enigma, another hero that we don't see that often, but still to this day, I mean, one of the most effective junglers in the game. And that was the big dichotomy at the beginning of Game 2. It was relatively even, except Enigma was like 3 levels up on the Doom, who was struggling to farm. He did also mess up, and he blocked one of his own camps with a ward by mistake. But still, just for me, it was really refreshing. For a while, I was enjoying all of this 6.79 stuff. I'm like, wow, look at these new strategies. Yeah, Necro Books, yeah, Handamitis. But to me, that gets gimmicky and old kind of fast. And it's nice to see this kind of infusion of Fnatic, not only running these old heroes, but winning with them. As I think we said on the Monday episode of the Dota Radio Morning Show, it's great to see teams experiment, but what's really cool is to see teams experiment and then win with their weird picks, and that's kind of what we saw here with Fnatic. So also with that said, Fnatic going to be playing up against Alliance today in 2 different best of 3s, 2 different tournaments. What is it, D2CL and
DTCL and D2L, I
And
believe.
D2L, yeah, that sounds right. So we're going to get to see how Navi, or pardon me, not Navi, Fnatic fares against Alliance now. They're sort of doing this gauntlet of like, okay, let's take out some of the best teams in the world and see how we fare. If they can take out Alliance in both of these best of threes today, I think that will be a difficult feat to achieve. But if they do, shit gonna go crazy in terms of Fnatic taking over the scene right now. I have high hopes. I'm going to be keeping my eyes peeled today for sure.
I believe they beat Alliance in one game in Dream League for the opener. I think that was the first match of Dream League was Alliance versus Fnatic, and they took them out. But again,
Yes.
I think I've said this before. Anything can happen in a best of one. Mm-hmm. I mean, when there's no adaptation, when there's no kind of trying to come back, anything can always happen.
Yeah.
But I'm still excited. They are my favorite team, and I do want them to do very, very well.
Absolutely. I mean, I haven't had a clear favorite team, but Fnatic, I think, has taken my heart once again with their awesomeness, their awesomeness. So you did just bring up Dream League. This is going to be a perfect segue for us. We're cruising through these early talking points. Might get our guest on a little bit earlier than planned, but that's A-okay, man. No problem. Let's talk Dream League. They had the second day of their season yesterday, I believe. Again, we talked Navi versus Alliance best of one, and then the two Navi Fnatic matches. Top tier games. You couldn't really ask for a better. If we're going to stream 3 matches, can't really ask for much of a better roster than that. But this was the first time that I actually watched Dream League. I didn't get to see any of the other stuff, and the production really blew me away. I mean, it's like TI3 quality production where they have the 4-person analysis desk. They cut back and forth into the games, beautiful alpha transitions, all this great fill content for in between games. The production was really top notch. I mean, I pretty much felt like I was watching regular TV. You know, it didn't feel like a regular Twitch stream. Like, all right, game's over. Here's a static image, and we'll let you sit here for a little while. I was pretty happily entertained. I think if you did a random sample of people that don't know what's going on, and you said, hey, what do you think about this? They'd probably think it was something on ESPN or SportsCenter, and they just didn't recognize the people, and they didn't know what they were talking about. It kind of blew me away. And also, I enjoyed their kind of tri-cast, if you will. They had Draskell, Bruno the Statsman, and Pyrian Flax. Talk about an interesting dynamic of casters there.
Yeah, there was something I actually saw. Somebody posted on Reddit, and I agree with this. Having Pyrian Flax on, just because of the fact, I mean, he's not as completely new, I think, as he kind of pretends to be. He pretends to be less good than he is, but he still is kind of. There are a lot of mechanics that he doesn't really know and that he doesn't totally understand. I mean, he always says there's about 30 heroes in the game I've never played before. And I think having someone who can just say these things like, oh my god, that does that? And it's like, yeah, that's exactly what that does. It gives this little bit of extra knowledge that might be assumed among those of us who've been casting forever and a lot of people who've been watching forever. But, maybe if we're trying to get new people into Dota, we need to be able to have someone who can work these kind of simple explanations and questions into a cast. And that's how we'll get people who maybe don't even play Dota but are excited by the competitive aspect of it to start understanding what's going on and start enjoying things. I mean, I'm at the point where I don't really go over a lot of simple things. And if I had someone like that around with me, it would be very, very easy to work those things in kind of a fun and exciting way, as opposed to just sounding condescending, like, oh, if you don't understand this, there's this. If you don't understand this, there's this.
Yeah. And oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I've been on some tricasts. When I was with Honcast, I did some like me, Breaky CPK, and Xander K.
Yeah.
And I have no qualms in saying that the Dream League TriCast went a lot better than any TriCast I've ever been a part of.
Yep.
I think they actually really have a good rhythm down with it, because usually I think TriCasting is overcrowded, but I'm actually really enjoying what they're doing there.
Yeah. I see someone in chat, Lockheed, saying that they built a perfect cast, and I'm still a little bit critical. TriCasts are notably difficult to pull off, because with 2 people, it's a really easy dynamic. Once I sort of slow down and stop talking, your co-caster knows, okay, it's going to be my turn. With 3 people, it's a lot harder to say, okay, now whose turn is it going to be to speak? And they talk over each other. And that was one thing that I noticed in the cast. They haven't worked out that dynamic quite perfectly. It's one of the best tri-casts I've ever seen, but they still have a little ways to go in terms of talking over each other. There were definitely some times where all 3 of them tried to talk at once, and I'm like, I really can't understand what any of you are saying right now, but that comes with time. It really is a difficult dynamic. What I liked more was the dynamic of having Draskell, who's like one of the most analytical minds you can have. You know, he's great at thinking something through and expressing his thoughts in a very clear step-by-step, okay, this leads me here, and that's why we're going to have X. You know, Purian, the complete opposite, and that role is surprisingly difficult to play. It's one of those things where I think he makes it look easy, because it's very easy to be that guy that poses those questions. You're kind of the noob factor. To do that and not be annoying is difficult. And I think his skill set is perfectly suited for that, because he's a talker. He has a lot of creative analogies. He's a very good entertainer. So he sort of uses that noobness that he plays up a little bit, conveyed in a way that's very non-threatening, non-annoying, non-attention seeking. And it's a great dynamic. And then having Bruno the Statsman in there for that kind of wild card aspect a little bit. It's a really harmonious dynamic, and then having 2GD come in between games to kind of lead the roundtable, I think is a nice dynamic as well. But I might be a little biased. I mean, I'm a big Purian Flax fan, so you know, really anything that Purian does, I'm going to be a fan of for the most part. But I liked it. I think they have a little ways to go with it in terms of getting that TriCast dynamic going. The only other complaint I had is it seems like Draskell does a disproportionate share of the work. I got this vibe that he was doing the play-by-play, doing most of the analysis, and then also doing most of like the post-game analysis as well. It's like if they lost Draskell and that whole duo, or that of those four people, I think everything would crumble. He seems to be like that staple, the staple glue that holds the team together, in my opinion.
He's the guy who, I mean, he is a caster, and he's very, very dedicated to that. And then you have Bruno, who does some casting, but he's more, I think, focused on the stats and the back end of things, and he's able to get a lot of really interesting dynamics in there, but he's not a guy who's used to carrying a cast. And Purian, I think, is charismatic enough to carry a cast, but he doesn't quite have, of course, the analytical knowledge.
Yep.
You know, as much fun as he is to listen to and as much as I enjoy his stuff. So, yeah, I can't disagree that Draskell is kind of the focal point there, but I don't think that... I mean, I think he seems like he's doing a lot of the work, but I do think all three of them are putting in a whole lot of the work to make it all come together.
Absolutely, I would agree with that. And the two other things I really liked about it are their sort of less serious approach. You know, there are a ton of serious streams out there, you know, and they found, I think, a really good dynamic of being serious enough that when I watch it, I still learn, I still get a lot of great information. It's still really interesting to hear what all three of them have to say, but it's a lot more light, you know. I actually laughed while watching it, which is not something that I do very often when I'm watching Twitch streams, especially competitive Dota. So that was really a nice dynamic for me. And I also loved that they have a dedicated cameraman. I think this is one thing that will be in the future of esports, having the dedicated cameraman. I cannot stand watching pro players or old school people do the camera. It's so jerky. It's so terrible. My camera is not perfect. I wish I had a cameraman so I didn't have to worry about it. I don't think it's fair or a reasonable thing to expect someone to be able to be a hardcore caster, like a play-by-play caster leading it and also doing the camera work. It's too much multitasking. I don't think that you can do both perfectly. I think it's too much for one person to do well, and you really need to segregate that out and have one person dedicated only to camera and then the casters dedicated only to casting and not have to worry about, oh, did I catch that on camera, all that kind of stuff. Good camera work is awesome, dude. I love it. It wasn't jerky. It was smooth. They caught everything. Loved it. No complaints about camera work whatsoever from me.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'll say is that if the lead caster is not doing the camera work, occasionally they're talking about something and the camera kind of jumps to it a few seconds later, and if it's something that they're only talking about for a second, the camera can kind of get lost in the shuffle of casting conversation. But aside from that, I completely agree. It's very nice to have somebody who is trained to do nothing but camera. Back when I did Han, there was a guy, I don't know if you knew him, named Snoopy.
Dangerous
who
Dan?
Was,
he was the camera guy when I was
didn't work
casting.
with Dangerous Dan. Snoopy did a lot of camera as well, and he kind of disappeared a little more quickly, I think. But he was very, very good at what he did. Dangerous Dan was also very, very good at what he did. And that's a place in which I think actually Han was a little bit ahead of a lot of other esports, that they had good dedicated cameramen.
Yeah, I think part of it was because Breaky was so notoriously bad with the camera that they needed another person in there. It is really hard though. I think a lot of people don't realize, like, I feel like I could do almost perfect camera if I'm not casting. But if I'm casting, it's just hard. You got to think about what you're going to say next. There's a lot of other things you have to be thinking about proactively, and it's sort of too much. It's like my brain can't handle doing really, really top-notch camera while I'm also trying to do play-by-play. But I don't know. That's just me. Maybe I just suck at multitasking. What are you going to do? So that about wraps up our first piece here, Chris. We're doing pretty well on time. This is part 1 of the Dota Radio Morning Show, episode 8. We are going to have our guest coming on next. We have Buller from the European Elite League, EEL, sort of the counterpart to the NEL, if you will. So we're going to talk to him a little bit about what's going on over in that scene. And I think that's going to segue nicely into our talking points about Meta Warriors. And then on that same topic, we're going to wrap it up today with another little bit of Q&A, but also a segment on the analysis desk about the Death Prophet. So plenty of interesting content coming your way here for part 2 of the Dota Radio Morning Show. Don't go anywhere, guys. We will be right back.